of a South Northants Committee, the Audit Committee. And if I say it myself, we're getting quite good at these remote meetings now. I don't think they'll ever replace real meetings where you can actually talk to folks in between walls, but I think we're making the best of these and they're working quite well. So we'll move swiftly on to apologies. Do we have apologies for non-attendance?
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies from Councillor Hal Davies. No substitutes.
Thank you. Declarations of interest. Would anyone like to declare any interest, personal interest, financial interest in agenda items? No, shaking of head. We'll move on then to the minutes of the previous meeting held on the, whenever it was held on, 28th of May. So are you content that they're a correct record that I may sign at some point in the future when we're allowed back in to see pieces of paper?
Agreed.
Agreed?
Agreed.
I was going to say silence means assent, but we better not adopt that, have we? Moving on then, agenda 4, chairman's announcements. I have no announcements. And agenda 5, urgent business. I'm not aware of any items of urgent business. So that brings us then neatly to the draft external audit results. And we have Maria, I saw her somewhere here. Would you like to skim through it or tell us what anything particular that you'd like to raise from them? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So I won't take you through the report page by page. I will in a moment just ask Justine to give an update on the audit and what's outstanding. But I thought probably better that I just give you a bit of an overview as to where we are and how we've approached the audit given the pandemic. So there are a few additional areas of risk that we had to consider because of the pandemic, being around going concern, interestingly. You know, when would we have ever thought we'd be in a position where we're considering the future position of local government bodies, but unfortunately, because of the pandemic, we've had to do a piece of work around, and we are having to do a piece of work around going concern. Also, there are areas where uncertainty has arisen, not surprising, I guess, in things like valuation of investment properties, all sorts of other pieces of information in areas where the pandemic's basically caused us to just raise questions around the future position and also any implications for those items within the statement of accounts. So the good news in all of that is that we agreed with your team that we would keep our foot on the pedal, we would keep running at the same pace, and your team have done a great job of responding, and we're also in agreement with that approach. So the audit has moved forward and progressed really well. So really pleased with that, and thanks to your finance team for all their help in that. There are some areas that are outstanding purely because of timing and also where we're waiting for things from elsewhere. So if I hand over to Justine just to give an update on those areas that are currently outstanding. And as I say, Chairman, I won't take you through page by page in the report, but at the end, we're happy to take any questions that anyone has. Justine.
So the appendix to the Head of Finance's report is our actual report. And as Maria said, we are still carrying out the audit, although we have finished the bulk of the work. So on the appendix on that page, there is a list of what's outstanding. I can't actually come to it, but actually it's essentially our final audit procedures. So it's in terms of a review of the final financial statements. It's our subsequent events review. We're also waiting for, we've just had the outcome of a revaluation of Brackley Leisure Centre and Tove Depot. So we're working through that, and that will result in a difference and a change in the value of the accounts. Your valuer had missed off the extension that was carried out during 2018, and that has given us a difference of £7 million in terms of an increase in value in the leisure centre. And as Maria said, we are considering going concern. So we are asking a few more questions around the council's reserves and also access to liquidity and liquid funds. So that's where we are at the moment.
Thank
And
you.
just on that going concern points, if I may, Chairman, just to make it really clear, I totally understand before anyone thinks that we may have just misunderstood the position with local government, totally understand that services will continue, totally understand the position that, you know, local government bodies aren't going to disappear. The issue for us on going concern, just to be really clear, is that when we sign the opinion, we're saying that we can see clear plans in place and a clear position for the 12 months after signing. And that's why going concern becomes an issue when we're in a situation with a pandemic that affects the future position from the point of view of the surety around that, and being really, really clear on what that position is. So that's why it's going concern. I'm not for a second saying that the council is not a going concern. Just to be really clear, I wouldn't want to set any hairs running.
Thank you. That's useful clarification. I mean, COVID is going to be an issue for every council, and any council will be foolish not to take that into account. I suspect it'll become more of an issue for the current year's situation rather than the year we're looking at before. I'll open it up, but just a couple of points. I find it quite reassuring because generally there are no major issues raised. I certainly take the point about the valuation, which was our independent valuer missed a bit, but well, a big bit really at Brackley. But I think that what I'm reassured by is A, that's picked up and spotted and that can be rectified, and B, that these valuations actually have no impact on what the bottom line, so it doesn't affect the operation of the council at all, but we need to get it right. So that's that. I understand that. And the other issue, which I hadn't mentioned, but of course is in the report, is our upcoming unitary and now this council's disappearance. So again, that's perfectly logical and sensible that needs to be flagged up as an issue to be kept under review. So having gabbled on that, but does any other member want to ask questions? Tony.
Thank you, Ash. Through the chair, just going back to the Brackley Leisure Centre, we're saying I believe it's valued now at 7 million. What was it valued at? I was just wondering how much of the investment we put in actually become part of that valuation.
I can take that. It was valued in the accounts at 7 million. It's been revalued and increased by about 6 million. So I think it's roughly 13 million pounds.
And how does that compare to the investment?
Sorry, I can't hear you.
How does that compare to the investment? So it's gone from 7 to 13. How much was invested?
Yeah, I think we can provide details of that investment and what the cost of the extension was. I don't have those figures to hand, but we can get those circulated to committee members.
Just to get a feel from how it went. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? I should say that and just get confirmation really. I mean, the date for the final approvals has been extended nationally from July to the end of November. I mean, ours are pretty much there. We've got the issues you've raised and the county pension fund, but are we still on track then? We've got a September meeting where we hope we can then sign off accounts. Are we on track still to be able to do that?
Chairman, yes. My plan is that we sign these accounts as soon as we can. So yes, we are certainly aiming for that date. The The only thing that will scupper us is if we don't get the assurance from the pension fund in time, but we will certainly be chasing hard, and I'm sure that your officers will be chasing as well. So we will make sure that we're rushing to get to that date. And actually, my aim, as always, is as soon as the work's done, is that we tie everything up as much as we can, so that it's already well in advance of that meeting, should we be able to do so. As I say, the only fly in the ointment is the timing of that pension fund confirmation, but we'll certainly have that in our sights.
Thank you. That's useful. So we've got it there. I would have thought that as our folks are so efficient, we'd be quite easy to audit, but that might be a biased remark, possibly. With okay, thank you for that. What we're asked to do is to note the contents of the draft external results for 2019-20. Are we content to do that?
Agreed.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. So with item 7 is the internal audit annual report and opinion. Mark, do you want to run us through that, please?
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, very briefly, Chair. Apologies for arriving a tiny bit late to the party. I was stuck on another meeting as well. So my name's Paul Capener. So although I really think of Mark as my boss, I'm actually his, I guess. So I'm here as the consortium director. Martin thought it would be a good idea for me to join you on at least one of your meetings, and I'm more than happy to do that, and I'll certainly join others as the year progresses. Thankfully, I have got Mark to take the papers for me because he knows your organisation far better than I do. But I just wanted to introduce myself so I just wasn't a strange face on the screen. So I'll pass over to Mark.
Thank you. Well, we'll leave you to sort out your in-house arrangements as to who does what, but you're both very welcome.
Thank you.
Okay. Any awkward questions go to Paul.
I'll try and think of some.
Thank you. So I've got 2 reports to take you through this evening. So the first of those is my annual report and head of audit opinion for the 19-20 year. So I'll just go straight into that. And if I could refer you all to your page 67, where we provide our overall assurance opinion for the year, significant assurance. So this is in accordance with the requirements of the public sector internal audit standards, that we do provide you with an opinion which is based on the work that we've completed during the year. So we're satisfied that there's generally a sound system of internal control to meet the council's objectives, and that these are, largely speaking, being applied effectively. Obviously, we have made some recommendations during the year, which the committee will already be familiar with through our progress reporting arrangements. What I tend to like to do normally is just to do a comparison with where we were 12 months ago. It's a bit more difficult for yourselves because the opinion that we provided last year was, of course, when South Northants and Cherwell were being sort of delivered as one audit plan and one annual report. Obviously, the splits occurred, so it's not really comparing like with like. But what I would say is that we have not seen any sort of adverse impact on the control environment that would have been caused by the significant workload at the start of the year as the 2 organisations split. So I think that's reflected in the fact that we're providing significant assurance again, and that's pleasing to note. If we move on to page 68, provide a little bit more detail about the work that we've done that's led us to that opinion. So our opinion is really based on our reviews of your fundamental financial systems, and your risk management system. Those are the key things that we would want to focus on. There is a table towards the back of the report, but just to highlight that at this point, we provided 1 full assurance opinion, 7 significant assurance opinions, and only 1 moderate assurance opinion, which is referred to on page 68. That was earlier in the year with regard to the homelessness audit that we undertook, where we were really looking to see how the council was developing its systems to deal with the extra requirements of the Homelessness Reduction Act. I think that's a good result to note. In terms of the systems that we audited last year and again this year, it's interesting to note that creditor payments was moderate last year, but is moved to significant this year. So I think that bears out the point I was making, that despite the significant workloads in splitting the 2 organisations, control on key systems has not suffered. So that's a really positive message. We are also highlighting on page 68 a couple of things we just need to draw to your attention. I think we mentioned this at the progress report in the May meeting, but whilst we started our work at CSN Resources for benefits, business rates and council tax, when COVID hit, it became impossible, really. There were so many other more important things that the team were dealing with that we, in agreement with Martin and Denise, we took the view that we wouldn't be able to provide, we hadn't done sufficient work at the point where we needed to cut it off to provide opinions on those 3 pieces of work. We were able to do that for debtors. That work was sufficiently complete for us to produce a report and provide an opinion on that. So we have transferred some of the time from last year to undertake more detailed testing for the council tax, business rates and benefits elements of what CSN Resources deliver. And that work's booked in to start in October. The other thing just to notice on that note on that page is we have flagged up that whilst, as it's already been mentioned, COVID-19 hit right at the end of the financial year, so wouldn't really have had an impact in 1920, but we are recommending that it is sort of highlighted in the annual governance statement, because that's really, we try to view that as a bit of a live document, and it is a significant area of risk going forward for all councils. So we've recommended that, and indeed my understanding is that the annual governance statement does make reference to the impact of COVID-19. So just moving through to the end of the report, just to highlight, and I know we're going to talk about this in a bit more detail in the next paper, but in terms of the recommendations that were due to be implemented by the 31st of March 2020, the online self-assessment process indicates that only 8 of those were outstanding at the end of the year. So their original agreed date for action was before the 31st of March, but those ones have been sort of a different date, a revised date has been given. So again, I try to sort of give committee members a bit of a benchmark. I think that that's a pretty low number to be left over at the end of the year. So I think it really shows that officers and managers for the council are committed to implementing internal audit recommendations, and that's borne out by the conversations I have and the work that I do, I can confirm that there is a very strong view that recommendations are owned by the council and are taken seriously. So I think that's another good news story. I think that's probably enough of a summary from me. I'm happy to take any questions that councillors may have.
Thank you. I think another good report. Yeah, Chris. Yeah, I see you waving, Chris.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm not just saying hello. I just wanted to pick up the homelessness audit recommendations and the management response to those, because the management response is that I mean, obviously they couldn't carry out the necessary training in time, but that they're now proposing to do something hopefully before September. And given that the government's furlough scheme is going to end, or currently at the moment is ending the end of October, and the ending of that may actually produce more homelessness, are we happy that training in September will give us enough confidence in the way the systems are being used to handle a potential increase in homelessness from the end of October onwards?
I'm not sure who's going to answer that. I think that
Yeah.
features in Jeff's report as well, doesn't it? But I'm reluctant to foist that one onto him. I think the only thing we can, Sandra, do you want to? Is this related to the homelessness?
I too have concerns that Chris has raised, and I do think it's imperative. I really can't see why we can't do some online training before that September. I mean, we haven't got a large number of staff to train, so I would have thought it was quite easy to set up a Zoom type training mechanism, and let's give the staff confidence to go forward, because I agree with Chris. I think we'll see repossessions and all sorts of things, and people turned out of rented accommodation. So I think we need to be well prepared for it.
I think, I mean, there's no one here the direct responsibility for that. So I suggest the only thing we can do is say that's been flagged up at internal audit and the audit committee, and there are some concerns that September is too late. I mean, there may be, I'm sure there are practical reasons why. They've obviously been fairly busy normally, and COVID has added to that, certainly regarding homelessness. But are you content if we take that back to the, I don't know which assistant director it will be, but
Chair, can I just suggest that I go away and get some more details of what the training programme is and what it will involve and include, and then circulate that to members for their information?
I think that will be useful, because our next meetings is September, so there's not a lot of point in coming back to that. But yeah, I think is that, I don't see we can do much else as a committee, but I think it's a reasonable point to have flagged up. And I think if we can say we'd feel more comfortable if it was possible to bring that forward in view of the government policy changes regarding their own support. Andrew, did you want to?
Yes, Chair. You know, obviously we've got the recommendation here within the audit report, but you know, I do know that Joe Barrett and her team are watching and monitoring this very, very carefully. You know, they managed to house everybody who presented themselves as homeless at the moment, and are looking to see what to do in future. So they will be looking for the new guidance, looking for the new best practice as it comes out anyway, as well as this more formal training.
Okay, that's useful. Well, I think we can do no more and just pass that back to them. And I'm sure they're aware of that, but if it could possibly be brought forward, they may be content with it. And as you say, they did manage in that initial sweep to resolve the problem. But I take the point. We're going into a different financial situation, and it may well be the problem will be more difficult. But I'm sure they're aware of that. But it doesn't do any harm, I think, if members agree for us to flag that up with the appropriate officers.
Good.
Thank you for that, Chris. Mark, did you want to come back on that?
Yeah, just to add that when I was pulling that report together, obviously there were a number of actions that were outstanding on homelessness, and they were all to do with the fact that we still needed to have this formal training session. But I did take some comfort from the fact that one-to-ones had already taken place, and case file reviews were being undertaken. So there would be an element of targeted training taking place anyway. So in actual fact, I took the view that all of those that are showing as outstanding are actually partly implemented, but we don't sign off recommendations until they're fully implemented. So that's why they're all left on there, because this training session still needed to take place that was cancelled because of the COVID-19 pandemic. So
yeah, that's useful. I'm reassured. I think the relevant officers are aware of it, but it won't do any harm for us to just flag that up. But it might irritate one or two of them who are on the ball anyway. But I that's why we're here. Okay, thank you for that. Any other questions or comments, folks? Well, I think if I got my school reports that were as good as they seem to be, I'd have been very happy. Overall significant assurance, only one moderate and one full. I think that's pretty good. We don't want to be complacent, but I think that's pretty good going. It shows that we're perfectly capable of looking after ourselves after the split with Cherwell. So thank you, Mark. That's useful. So we have to note the contents of the internal audit annual report. Are we content to do that?
Great.
Yes, thank you. We move on. Do you want to continue then, Mark, with the update report?
Okay, so when I came to the last meeting, it was right in the middle of the COVID pandemic, when it was really biting hard. So we took the view that we wouldn't be providing a recommendation tracking update on the report that went to the May meeting. But I think you, Chair, made a specific request for a recommendation tracking report to be included at this meeting. So that's the purpose of this particular report. So it takes the cut-off point. I've just got to remind myself, I think it was to the 30th of June now, rather than the 31st of March. So we've moved forward a bit. There are a total of 13 that remain showing as outstanding, not fully signed off. And actually, we've already talked about quite a number of those. So I think there were 3 level 2 homeless and another 3 homeless level 3s, but we've dealt with all of those. All of the others relate to a piece of work we did, I think in 1819 actually, on GDPR. And just to put some context around that, there seemed to be quite a lot of work that still needed to be undertaken when we undertook that piece of work to demonstrate compliance with the new GDPR regulations. I believe that the split from Cherwell did impact initially on the work that needed to take place. And then I think LGR has had a similar impact, and that's the reason why we're seeing recommendations that now have dates to be delivered by the 31st of March 21, because whatever happens in terms of ensuring that we've got systems and processes that enable us to demonstrate compliance with GDPR cannot really be done specifically just for South North Hands, it needs to take on board what the process is going to be for the new unitary authority. So I think that's the main reason we're seeing recommendations that we would normally have expected to have been implemented by now, not having been done so, but for valid reasons, because it needs to be done in conjunction with the other authorities that will be forming the new unitary authority. And that's probably all I would say on those.
Thank you. I think we've probably touched on the main issue, the homelessness. Do anyone want any other comments? We've spoken to homelessness, the data protection issue. Chris? Yes,
just
Chris.
again asking for some reassurance that the issues you picked up on GDPR, are they serious enough to leave us open to any legal challenge, or are we largely compliant with the legislation?
I think in order to answer that, we perhaps need to actually undertake a piece of work at this point to see where we're at, which we can certainly take some of the time that we've got allocated for follow-up for us to do more than just look at what's on the self-assessment tracker. So obviously I'd have to agree that through Martin, but if that's an option, we could use some of the time that we've got in the plan for follow-up just to specifically look at where we are now on GDPR. And whilst we understand that there is work ongoing, identify what are the crucial fundamental things that we need to be ensuring that whilst we're moving towards the new unitary are in place. So I'm happy to do that.
Andrew?
Chair, that's my wording actually in the report with regards to GDPR, because when I saw it, I was concerned as well. And I am aware that there's reduced capacity there. I don't think there's anything outstanding which is going to lead us open for a legal challenge, but there are some things I'd like to get in place. And so what I was suggesting is that I was taken by what Mark said right at the beginning here about the fact that as a council, we own the recommendations. And at the moment, I don't know that we actually do, because it was, as you said, it was some time ago. So what I would suggest is that our data protection manager, i.e. Louise, just sits down with Mark and just looks at those recommendations again. So we can be clear which ones must be put in. And if it's the opportunity to piggyback off anything which is being done for the LGR, then let's use that as well, because if they're developing policies, then let's use somebody else's resource to get us there, because we have got a limited capacity there. So that's what I wanted to happen. And although we've got the date there of the 31st of March, I would like to see those things in place sooner rather than later, i.e. in the autumn or the winter of this year. So if there's a couple of recommendations which were, these are the ones you should get in place, then I think that's where our resource and our effort ought to be concentrated.
That's useful. That's just what we want to hear, I think, in response to that question. Tony?
Andrew, just going back on what you were saying about could we use others, one of the things I've been led to believe is that we should try to take the lead and be the influencer. How does that stack up with the direction you're thinking of?
Well, I think if I talk generally, as a council, we have various areas of which we're very proud of, and we believe, we are very exemplars with regards to that, and that's where we try and make our influence felt. This is an area where perhaps we can learn from others, because obviously, there are certain policies we haven't got in place, and not be afraid to do that. There is an active information governance group, and I would suggest that if there are policies to be produced for the unitary, then we should pinch those. Or if somebody actually has a good policy at the moment, which we can use as a basis for ours, then we should do. You know, this may be an area whereby we may be able to use other people's examples rather than being the exemplar perhaps in this particular area.
So it sounds as if it might need to come back to us, or at least something to have a note of what's happened in the meantime to drive this forward. There seems to be a will to do it. I'm reluctant to add another report into September's meeting, but hopefully it will just be fairly brief. So, will it be another internal audit report, or will it be from you, Andrew?
Well, I would suggest that Mark talks to Louise about this, but the way I see it is, if there's a conversation which is look at the recommendations, then that can go into Mark's report, and I can pick up again through the covering report our approach to this.
Sandra?
Yes, I think that sounds the best way forward.
Jeff, did you want to come in on that?
No, I was just going to agree with everything that's been said. Louise works very closely with the other authorities going into the unitary. There's a lot of best practice that's shared both to and from us. So I think that's a good way forward to bring something back to you in September to give that level of assurance that you're looking for.
Okay, that's useful. Is that agreed, folks?
Agreed.
Yes. Okay. Well, thank you for that. If there are no other comments, the recommendation is that we note the contents, but we also we need now to add to that we'll get a further report in September on the GDPR issues. Is that okay with everyone?
Agreed.
Great.
Thank you. Which brings us on to agenda 9, which is the quarterly performance risk and finance monitoring report. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't intend taking you all through this line by line. So what I would like to do is refer members to section 2, which gives a summary and introduction. First of all, in the finance summary, it sets out a quick summary of our financial position this year. I'm sure that if you have any further queries, Martin and I can answer those once you ask any questions. But of course, because of COVID, that's put a significant pressure on the council, and you can see the current figures there. And obviously, we're looking to see what further funding comes forward, particularly with regards fees and charges as the year goes on. So we'll be keeping members up to date with that. The capital programme, as you're all aware, was approved at council last week. In terms of performance, obviously COVID has had a major impact on a number of areas. I think there's some obvious ones there, such as council tax and business rates, which have been impacted by that. And going forward, we're looking at how we can maximise the reliefs available to ratepayers, and also with regards council tax, what the appropriate point and way of actually undertaking recovery action later in the year is, bearing in mind obviously the very sensitive situation with lots of residents' personal circumstances. There's some other PI issues there which are highlighted. I don't intend going through them all one by one, because obviously they are all COVID related, and we are putting into place action plans to make sure that they move forward. Obviously, housing's one thing that's already been touched upon. There's been staffing changes in the housing team with a new member of staff coming into the team, and we're already seeing significant improvement in that. And lastly, before I take questions, if I may, I'd just like to refer you all to the leadership register, sorry, risk register. That's unchanged from last month. There's very much a focus on COVID, as you may see from the fine print in the appendix, and significant efforts and resources are being put into place to make sure that our risk levels remain within the risk appetite of the council, and we don't have any high risks still despite the current situation. However, we are very closely monitoring our risks at a leadership level to make sure that we can take mitigating action. So what I'd suggest, if I may, Chairman, is to ask if any members have any questions about the report.
Thank you. Any question? Tony? You're still muted, Tony. You're still muted.
I'm not now. Could be pressing a space bar and I was trying to click on it. Really through the chair and coming back to Martin. With regards to council tax and the position we're in with the residents, have we given a holiday at all on monthly payments? Are we exposed? And do we think we're going to have a big exposure on this or not, Martin?
Okay, through you, Chair. In terms of have we given a holiday to council taxpayers? No, we haven't. It's interesting to see that the council tax figures compared to the target are very, very marginally below target, which is really encouraging. So people have continued to pay. What we've had in relation to support from the government relating to council tax is a grant of about 284,000 relating to giving hardship relief to residents. And we're in the process to some residents, those on working age claimant council tax reduction scheme. So we're in the process of putting that onto account. So that will assist in increasing the collection rates associated with that. But in terms of actually saying people can stop paying, we've not said that, and we don't intend to say that because we still expect council tax to be paid. We still seek to do recovery at the appropriate point, and we are just behind the target. If people are facing significant financial hardship, they can get in touch with us and we can have a look at those particular cases. But we don't have a blanket policy of not collecting council tax.
I would think the concern probably comes after the furlough finishes, when people perhaps lose their jobs. Just a concern there.
And if that is the case, then potentially they could get council tax reduction scheme support there, which would be put onto their account and reduce their liability going forward. And so that's another option they've got. So if that is the situation, certainly we would encourage residents to get in touch with us to see what support we can give them.
Thank you.
Could I add something to that through the chair, if I may? Just to say, we do have a very high proportion of direct debit payers, and that proportion has remained consistently high throughout the crisis, which is encouraging that most residents are still able to pay. And also, we obviously have the debt advice team, and we very much encourage residents to take advantage of those services, that they can actually help individual residents find a way forward if they're in financial difficulty.
Thank you. Chris.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick one relating to coronavirus. I mean, at the moment, Northampton is seeing a bit of an increase, which is causing quite a lot of local concern. Is that built into the risk register about how that might impact on both our staffing levels and our ability to deliver services? I couldn't actually see it specifically in the leadership risk register, but I may have missed it.
If I may, through the chair, coronavirus is actually goes across all of the risk factors. So what we haven't done is actually identified a specific risk, but the mitigating actions we're taking through all of the risk factors actually take coronavirus into account. Also, separate to this, we have a group of senior managers who meet weekly to actually look at the current situation with regard to coronavirus and how that's affecting services and staffing, so that we can respond week by week to how we need to, reallocate resources and what the issues are coming forward. And we're also part of the network of Northants authorities where we're liaising with public health and the NHS, every week, so that we know what the situation is and we know how it affects us locally within South Northants. And obviously we're also aware what's happening in Northampton, so that we can take account in real time of these things.
I mean, I don't know what others feel, but I just wonder whether we're not flagging it up enough as an issue. And I can understand that all the work's going on, but the fact that it doesn't now appear in the risk register, I just wonder whether that's a weakness, because I know one of the one of the wards that's being picked up as being particularly affected at the moment is Blisworth and Road, which is actually in our area. And I just wonder whether it ought to be raised as a separate risk. And I know it feeds into everything, but it just doesn't seem to appear anywhere in the risk register.
That's Andrew.
Chair, I think Councillor Loss has hit it on the head there. In that it does impact on everything, and that's the approach that we've taken to it. You know, it's an external factor over which we have little control, but obviously we do have control over how it impacts our services. So that's the approach we've taken to this, is to make sure that what impact does it have on our finances? So it's in there. What impact does it have on our resources? Again, that's one of the things that we actually have within the risk register anyway. And as an aside to that, and again, as Jeff has said, what we then have is a very focused approach to coronavirus through the tactical control group, who are looking at as well. And so, for example, we keep reinforcing the message. You know, Martin and I today have seen the next newsletter to go out to all staff and to all members about exactly what it is that we're doing with regards to businesses and communities in response to the Northampton issue. And also reinforcing the guidance to our members and staff as well, and that's coming out tomorrow, I believe. Again, so you know, there are constant messages on that. The TCG group is looking at that, and what the risk register does is try and deal with the impact on that on our services and resources. Thank
you. I think I take your point, Chris, and I wondered that when I initially looked at it, but it just. It's quite difficult, isn't it? Because if you had a COVID-19 category, it would pretty much cross-reference everything else. I mean, I understand what you're saying. Sandra, do you want to...
Well, I'm sorry, I'm probably going off a bit off piste here, but I do think perhaps the local ward members ought to be alerted about Road and Blisworth. I don't know whether they have been, but I think it would be useful just to inform them if they don't already know.
It's actually Road, Blisworth and Yardley Gobion.
Well, even better then, Yardley Gobion as well.
And they are aware of it, I believe. I mean, Ian's aware, obviously, from the Yardley Gobion aspect, and it was discussed this morning.
I mean, I was talking to a member from that neck of the woods yesterday, and they never mentioned it in conversation, but perhaps they didn't think it was important enough.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. I could just come back. I'm not saying that we're not doing anything. I'm just saying that, and you're obviously putting in place an awful lot of mitigation measures. It's just that the risk register isn't showing that. And I leave it with you as to whether you think it would be useful to have a specific entry on it, which shows the mitigation that's being done. So we can actually say, looking back, yes, we were doing all these things.
Yeah, it's a good point. Jeff, did you want to?
Yes, I think that's a very good point from Councillor Lofts. And can I suggest that we take this away to consider whether we should have a specific COVID risk, or whether we actually give more detailed supporting information in existing risks to make it a bit clearer and to give a higher level of assurance that we are looking at COVID across all of the risks more clearly.
I mean, I do accept it would look odd if the one single biggest risk that we're facing, pretty much, isn't specifically mentioned, even though it clearly is covered. But I take the point. Paul, did you want to make an internal audit point?
Yeah, well, I just think there's probably valid comparisons that we could make with our NHS counterparts, and just to reference the fact that the vast majority of NHS organisations I work with have done just what's been suggested, which is to have a COVID risk that highlights what the strategic risks of the organisation are. And then I think where there's specific risks to other areas of the business operationally, they may also reference them against those. So it's sort of, I think Jeff was sort of reflecting on the possibility you might have an all-encapsulating risk, or to capture it in each risk as it's appropriate. Interestingly, I think most of my NHS organisations have sort of done both, because I think it's really important that you're absolutely sighted on the very strategic risks that you face as a result of the pandemic, but then you also reflect in certain business areas where there may be specific risks as well.
Yeah, I take that, and I accept Chris's point. I personally would like to see a specific reference in the risk register, even if it only cross-references to other issues that are already dealt with. I do think it does look odd when COVID doesn't have its own category when you're looking at risk. But we'll leave it with you to take back then, and we'll look forward with interest to the next version.
Chair, if it'd be okay, Mark and I'd like to take our leave now.
No, that's fine. Thank you for coming and for staying for that. It was a useful contribution after that.
Yeah,
don't feel obliged to stay. I nearly said the bitter end, but to the end of the meeting.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for your presentation.
Cheerio. Thank you.
Thank you.
So the quarterly reports, we're asked to note the reports and to review the leadership risk, which I think we've just done.
Agreed.
We agreed with that. Thank you. Which moves us on to the anti-money laundering policy. Martin, are you doing that with us?
Yes, I'll do that one. Thank you, Chair. This is a revised policy. So the previous policy was out of date. It needed updating. It made references to Sherwood District Council, for example, which no longer exists. And so we've reviewed it, we've revised it, we've updated it. You've got the key contacts in there in relation to who's responsible for anti-money laundering issues, which is me. And if there are concerns relating to me, then the lead officer then becomes Denise Taylor. So that's contained within the policy. It gives details in terms of what staff should do if they become suspicious of any transaction. It does make reference to a certain level of cash that's received, but of course we're a cashless organisation, so we don't really accept cash, but there is provision to use that if we need to. So we still include, even though we don't accept cash, we still include that within the policy, just in case we were presented with a significant amount of cash and needed to consider whether we thought that was a money laundering issue or not. So the policy is a fairly standard anti-money laundering policy. As I say, it's been updated, refreshed and reviewed, and it comes to you for your consideration.
Thank you. And just to prove that I've read it, paragraph 7.9 refers to all heads of service must ensure that their staff, etc., comply with the law, and that actually should read assistant directors. I'm looking at Martin. Is that should say assistant director?
Yeah, that's right. It should say assistant directors.
But if I would have thought that's more sensible. If you've got to check on each one, there's fewer assistant directors than there are heads of service, so it's easier and more logical for that to be the case. So will that be amended before the?
Yes, we'll amend that for the final version.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments, folks? No? In which case, we're asked to approve the revised anti-money laundering policy contained in Appendix 1, subject to the amendment in paragraph 7.9 to read assistant directors.
Agreed.
Agreed?
Agreed.
And sorry, Richard would
Chair, through you, Chair, if I may. You're being asked with this item and the next item to approve a new or revised policy. So I will need a proposer and a seconder, if possible, for that, please.
Right. Well, I'll propose it.
I'll second it.
Thank you.
Okay.
We've got lots of.
I've got proposed by Councillor Harries, seconded by Councillor Barnes, and we will need to do the same for the next one as well.
Okay. Thank you. Yes. Which brings us on to the next one then, which is the revised whistleblowing policy. And I think Andrew's going to run through that for us.
Thank you, Chair. I should have recorded what Martin said because it's not going to say for this one, really. But just to say that internal audit have now gone, but they actually raised this in the first instance in saying that it wasn't clear how our contractors would actually use our whistleblowing policy. And that's when I had a look at it and thought to myself, it's way out of date. You know, it was a joint one as well. And as I said within my report, you don't need to have a whistleblowing policy, but as a good employer, then you would want to have one. And if you're going to do it, then it needs to be open and transparent, and people need to not be afraid of using it, and are able to come forward with any concerns that they have, because we want them to, and also to be very, very clear about how to make those concerns known. So that's what we've done within the report, is to make sure that, so I'm the whistleblowing officer for the council as a whole, but obviously if a complaint is about me, then I've set out how that can actually be dealt with as well. And obviously if it's real senior managers, then Chair, we've put you down as the person who would get involved in that first instance. It's just making sure that everybody has somebody, the right avenue within which to take this. So hopefully it's a lot clearer. And for people like contractors, again, we've clarified just one point of contact. If anybody who isn't a member of staff and doesn't know who to go to, should just come to me, and I'll pick it up as a whistleblowing officer.
Yes, thank you. I mean, it looks like I would expect a whistleblowing policy to look like, I must say. I'm amused to see that Chairman of Audit Committee is the sort of the last resort if all else fails, so that's fair enough. Any questions or comments? Sandra?
The concern I've always had about whistleblowing is actually making sure that, I'm thinking about the staff here, they are actually feel they're in a supportive organisation to enable them to actually whistleblow should it need to happen. And I find this, we can have all the words written down, but it's actually being able to assure staff members that they're not stepping out of line by wanting to whistleblow. And I just wondered how we would support them through that and who would be the most appropriate person.
Well, I think there's three strands to it. One is that, first of all, you need to have a policy which shows that you're welcoming whistleblowing if it's there, rather than one which, if I take the old one, for example, it started off by talking about all of the sanctions that would be taken if you were found to be fraudulently whistleblowing, and it was just completely wrong. So first of all, I think is actually having the policy in place and making sure that it's a positive policy. Second thing is its promotion. So we need to make sure that people know that it's there, and we can do that through the website and also through our newsletters. The third thing is much more difficult, but I'm glad to say that I think we've got it, and that's having the right culture. And as Councillor Barnes says, you can have any policy in the world, all the right words there, but if you haven't got the right culture there, then people can be frustrated in bringing things forward. I like to think that we have got a good culture, but obviously if we found that to be the case, that anybody was getting in the way of any kind of whistleblowing issue, then we would step in and take the appropriate action.
Thank you for that, Andrew. Do we ever do a role play? Because I think that could actually be very positive for a lot of staff to actually see it in reality, how it would actually work.
We can, I'll take that away, because
just as a thought, I've used it somewhere else and it was quite effective, and it just gave confidence to the staff that yes, it would be all right to do it because this is how it would progress. And I think it's putting the theory into practice.
Yeah, I'll link that into the promotion that we were talking about.
Might be the only live theatre allowed at the moment.
I don't mind being a whistleblower.
I think we're content with that. So I'm looking for a proposer and a seconder. Would someone like, Sandra, like to propose it? Can we have a seconder, please? Chris? Proposed Sandra Barnes, seconded Chris Lofts. Are we all agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you. Excellent. Thank you for that. So that brings us on to the Treasury Management Report. Back to Martin again.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Chairman. This is quite a technical report, but I'll just highlight a couple of areas of interest. Paragraph 3.1 shows the amount of funds we've got invested at the end of June, at the end of the first quarter, and they total 31.6 million. They're listed out in the private part of this agenda, so you can see where all those investments are held when we come to that part of the meeting. And then I just wanted to highlight further down the performance so far this year, because it kind of bucks the trend in terms of what we've heard about coronavirus so far a little bit. So if I'm referring to paragraph 3.8 and the table underneath that, and if we look at the interest budget so far, it's 62,500 is the expected income at this point in the year. We've actually received £62,919. So we're actually £419 better off than we anticipated, despite interest rates being cut on a number of occasions, and despite the returns that we can get being absolutely minimal, 0.1%, sometimes even lower than that. We are just slightly above the interest budget. And the reason for that is because we've had a number of government grants, significant government grants that have come into us to administer. We've had the money up front, we've then devised a policy and we've moved the money out, and that's been based on the demand for those grants. So we've had some surplus cash which we've been able to invest, and that's the reason, primarily the reason for that slightly favourable, I say slightly, but slightly favourable variance on this year so far. If we project then to the rest of the year and we take into account all the grants money we've received, and we've distributed most of that now, that's now gone out, we actually expect that by the end of this financial year we'll be £60,000 below the total interest budget, and that's highlighted in that paragraph below. So that's just the main point that I want to pick up as part of this. You've then got a split of where the investments are held, and as I say, there's more detail on that when we get into the private part of the agenda. Always quite useful, I think, then if we jump to paragraph 3.10 in the view from Arlene Close in terms of what the economy is doing. So they give us that commentary on the economy and describe what's happened and what they expect to happen. And then at the bottom of page 121, you've got a table which I think again is also always quite useful. So this is the view of Arlene Close, our Treasury Management advisors, in terms of what they think interest rates will do going forward. So 0.1 at the moment, and they expect it to stay at 0.1% over right up until June 2023. So at this point in time, they're not forecasting any increase or decrease in the Bank of England base rate, and that's interesting to know, I think. So on that point, I'll pause, Chairman. I'll see if there's any questions, and we might have some more when we get into the private part of the agenda.
Yeah, thank you. Let's say not good news, but not surprising. Chris.
Thank you, Chair. Paragraph 3.9 just refers to the 3 million loan to Silverstone. I mean, Silverstone, as far as I'm aware at the moment, aren't open. And I just wonder whether, has that changed the risk level?
Just a point of clarity, Silverstone are open. They have reopened their doors. So that attraction, people can go and visit it. You can buy tickets online. You can go and visit the attraction. The Grand Prix coverage is being run out at Silverstone Museum, which also is good promotion for the site. So people can go into the experience if they want to. If we want to get into the detail in relation to that particular investment, I think we need to have that discussion as part of the private part of the agenda.
Yeah, which we've got another Treasury Management report, and if we're talking about conditions of individual companies and organisations, we need to do that in that section of the agenda. Any other questions or comments? No? In which case we are asked to note the contents, to receive the information, let's get this right, to note the contents and of the Q1 Treasury Management Report. So I've stumbled over that, but do we agree to do whatever I meant to say? Thank you. Which brings us on to the review of the committee work programme. Hopefully we've got the final accounts at the September meeting. Do you want to add anything to that, Martin? I mean, it's on there.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The only thing that I want to say is we just need to correct, there's a typo in there. So the account should be the 1920 sign-off process, not the 2021 sign-off process. So we just need to amend that, but the rest of the work programme seems fine. We touch wood and cross fingers that the accounts will be ready and audited and ready for approval by the time we get to the September meeting. That's what we're all aiming for. But it will be the 1920 accounts, not the 2021 accounts.
I'm sure we all noticed that. Richard, what are you going to tell us we need to do?
You're muted.
Sorry, I'm back.
Yes.
Just through you, Chair, if I may, I was just going to reply to Martin and say that is my copy of the committee work programme, so it's probably my typing error. So I will rectify that and ensure that that comes correctly to the next meeting, that it is the 1920 account sign off. That was it. Thank you.
Thank you. We all spotted that, didn't we? Yes, of course we did. Sandra.
When are we going to sign off the last accounts? Next year's?
September.
Okay, so 18-19 accounts have been signed off and approved. 19-20 we're hoping to sign off in September of this year, and then 2021. If you think about it, they will be closed at the point of vesting day. So 31st, they'll run up until the 31st of March. But in terms of closing the accounts, auditing the accounts, signing the accounts off, approving the accounts, that will be for West Northamptonshire for the new authority to do, because that will take place in their first financial year that they're in existence, even though it relates to the last.
Can we be invited back then? Final party or something.
Oh yeah, because I don't think we should take a cavalier attitude if it's not going to be us and just say, well, to hell with it, spend it all.
I mean, I just think we should see it through, that was all.
Yeah, well, I wondered that, and yes, but apparently not.
Oh.
I mean, there was a rule going back that previous chairmen had to come back to, and they continued until such time as they'd finished their job. But that wasn't audit, and I'm not looking for the job, got to say.
Right, okay.
So, subject to that minor change, are we happy with the work programme as it is? Yes, thank you.
Happy.
Thank you very much. And so now we move into, we need to exclude the press and the public. I don't need to read this all out, do I, Richard? It's on the agenda. So the following items contain exempt information as defined in Part 1, Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 72, paragraphs 3 and 7. So are we agreed that we do that?
Agreed.
Thank you. So in which case then we move on to, when I can find it.
So have we stopped being live on YouTube?
Well, until I'm told we're not live.
It still says live on my